Borromeo the Astrologer, A Monkish Tale, by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. At the period of the famous plague of Milan in 1630, a frenzy of superstition seized upon the population high and low. Old prophecies of a diabolical visitation reserved for their city in that particular year of grace prepared the way for this wild panic of the imagination. When the plague broke out, terror seems to have acted to a degree scarcely paralleled upon the fancy or the credulity of the people. Excitement in very many cases produced absolutely the hallucinations of madness. Persons deposed in the most solemn and consistent terms to have themselves witnessed diabolical processions, spoken with an awful impersonation of Satan, and been solicited amidst scenes and personages altogether supernatural, to lend their human agency to the nefarious designs of the fiend by consenting to disseminate by certain prescribed means the virus of the pestilence. Some of the stories related of persons possessed by these awful fancies are in print, and by no means destitute of a certain original and romantic horror. That which I am about to tell, however, has, I believe, never been printed. At all events, I saw it only in manuscripts, sewed up in vellum with a psaltery and a half-dozen lives of saints, in the library of the old Dominican monastery which stands about 2 leagues to the northeast of the city. With your permission, I am about to give you the best translation I was able to make of this short but odd story, of the truth of which, judging from the company in which I found it, the honest monks entertained no sort of doubt. You are to remember that all sorts of tales of wonder were at that time flying about and believed in Milan, and that many of these were authenticated in such a way as to leave no doubt as to the bona fides of those who believed themselves to have been eyewitnesses of what they told. Monks and country padres, of course, believed, but so did men who stood highest in the church, and who, unless fame belied them, believed little else. In the year of our Lord, 1630, when Satan, by divine permission appearing among us in person, afflicted our beautiful city of Milan with a pestilence unheard of in its severity, there lived in the Strada Piana, which has lately been pulled down, an astrologer calling himself Borromeo. Some say he came from Perugia, others from Venice, I know not. He it was who first predicted in the year of our Lord 1628, by means of his art, that the pale comet which then appeared would speedily be followed not by war or by famine, but by pestilence, which accordingly came to pass. Beside his skill in astrology, which was wonderful, he was profoundly versed in alchemy. He was a man great in stature and strong, though old in years, and with a most reverent beard. But though seemingly austere in his life, it is said that he was given up in secret to enormous wickedness, having shut himself up in his house for more than a month, with his furnace and crucibles. Truly he had made repeated and near approaches to the grand arcanum. He had arrived, as he supposed, at the moment of projection. He collects the powder and tries it on molten lead. It was a failure. He was too wise to be angry. The long pursuit of his art had taught him patience. But while he is pondering in a profound and gloomy reverie, a retort, which he has forgotten in the furnace, explodes. He sees in the smoke a pale young man, dressed in mourning, with black hair, and viewing him with a sad and reproachful countenance. Borromeo, who lived among chimeras, is not utterly overcome, as another man might be, and confronts him, amazed, indeed, but not terrified. The stranger shook his head like a holy young confessor, who hears an evil shrift, and says he, rather sternly, "Borromeo, Borromeo, beware of covetousness, which is idolatry. On this sordid pursuit which you call a science, have you wasted your days on earth and your peace hereafter?" "Young man," says the alchemist, too much struck by the manner and reproof of the stranger to ask himself how he came there, "wealth is power, to do good as well as evil. To seek it is, therefore, an ambition as honorable as any other." "We both know why you seek it, and how you would employ it," answers the young man gravely. The old man's face flushed with anger at this rebuke, and he looked down frowningly to the table whereon lay the book of his spells. But he bethought him this must be a good spirit, and he was abashed. Nevertheless, he roused his courage and shook his white mane back, and was on the point of answering sternly, when the young man said with a melancholy smile, "Besides, You will never discover the grand arcanum, the elixir vitae, or the philosopher's stone." His words, which were as soft as snowflakes, fell like an iron mace upon the heart of the seer. "Perhaps not," said the astrologer frigidly. "Not perhaps," said the stranger. "At all events, young man, for as such you appear, and I know what spirits seek who take that shape. The science has its charms for me, and when the pleasures of the young are as harmless as the amusements of the aged, I'll hear you question mine." "You know not what spirit you are of. As for me, I'm contrite and humble. Well I may," says the stranger faintly with a sigh. "Besides, what you have pursued in vain and will never by your own researches find, I have discovered." "What? Yes, the tincture that can prolong life to virtual immortality, and the dust that can change that lead into gold. But I care for neither." "Why, young man, if this be true," said Borromeo in a rapture of wonder, "you stand before me an angel of wisdom, in power and immortality like a god." "No," says the stranger, "a long-lived fellow with a long purse, that's all." "All? Everything?" cries the old man. Will you? "Yes, sir, you shall see," says the young man in black. "Give me that crucible. It is all a matter of proportions. Water, clay, and air are the material of all the vegetable world. The flowers and forests, the wines and the fruits. The seed is both the laboratory and the chemist, and knows how, with the sun's help, to apportion and combine." While he said this with the abstracted manner of one whose mind is mazed in a double reverie, while his hands work out some familiar problem, he tumbled over the alchemist's papers, and unstopped and stopped his bottles of crystals, precipitates, and elixirs, taking a little from this and a little from that, and throwing all into a small gold cup that stood on the table. But, like a juggler, he moved those bottles so deftly that the quick eyes and retentive soul of the old man vainly sought to catch or keep the order of the process. When he had done, there was hardly a thimbleful. "Is that it?" whispered the old man, twinkling with greedy eyes. "No," said the stranger, with a sly smile. "There is one very simple ingredient which you have forgotten." He took a large, flat, oval gold box, with some hair set under a crystal in the lid of it, and, looking at it for a moment, he seemed to sigh. He tapped it like a snuff-box. There was within it a powder like vermilion, and on the inside of the lid, in the center, was the small enamel portrait of a beautiful but sinister female face. The features were so very beautiful, and the expression so strangely blended with horror, that it fixed the gaze of the old man for a moment, and, was it illusion? He thought he saw the face steadily dilating, as if it would gradually fill the lid of the box, and even expand to human dimensions. "Yes," said the stranger, as having taken some of the red powder, he shut the cover down again with a snap. "She was beautiful, and her lineaments are still clear and bright. Nothing like darkness to keep them from fading. And so the poor little miniature is again in prison." Then he dropped the box back into his pocket. Then he took 2 iron ladles, and heating in the one his powder to a white heat, and bidding the alchemist melt a pellet of lead in the other, and pour it into the ladle which held the powder, there arose a beautiful purple fire in the bottom of it, with an intense fringe of green and yellow, and when it subsided there was a little nut of gold there of the bigness of the leaden pellet. The fiery eyes of the alchemist almost leaped from their sockets into the iron cup, and he could have clasped his marvelous visitor round the knees and worshipped him. "And now," says the stranger very gently and earnestly, "in return for satisfying your curiosity, I ask only your solemn promise to prosecute this dread science no more." "You'll not give it. Take then my warning, and remember the wages of this knowledge is sorrow." "But won't you tell me how to commute, and you have not produced the elixir?" the old man cried. "'Tis folly, and, as I've told you, worse, a snare," answered the young man, sighing heavily. "I came not to satisfy, but to rebuke your dangerous, though fruitless frenzy. Besides, I hear my friend still pacing the street. Hark, He taps at the window." Then came a sharp rattle, as of a cane tapping angrily on the window. The young man bowed, smiling sadly, and somehow got himself away, though without hurry, yet so quickly that the old man could not reach the door till after it had closed and he was gone. "Oaf that I am!" cried the astrologer, losing patience and stamping on the ground. "How have I let him go? He hesitated. He would have yielded. His scruples, benevolent perhaps, I could have quieted. And yet in the very crisis I was tongue-tied and motionless, and let him go." He pushed open the little window from which he observed the street, and thought he saw the stranger walking round the corner, conversing with a little hunchback in a red cloak, and followed by an ugly dog. At sight of the great white head and beard and the fierce features of the alchemist, bleared and tanned in the smoke of his furnace, people stopped and looked. So he withdrew, and in haste got himself ready for the street, waiting for no refreshment, though he had fasted long, for he had the strength as well as the stature of a giant, and forth he went. By this time the twilight had passed into night. He had his mantle about him, and his rapier and dagger, for the streets were dangerous, and a feather in his cap, and his white beard hidden behind the fold of his cloak. So he might have passed for a tall soldier of the guard. The pestilence kept people much within doors, and the streets more solitary than was customary. He had walked through the town 2 hours and more before he met with anything to speak of. Then, lo, on a sudden, near the fountain of the Lion, it being then moonlight, he discovers in a solitude the figure of his visitor, standing with the hunchback and the dog, which he knew by its ungainly bones, and its carrying its huge head so near the ground. So he shouts along the silent street, "Stay a moment, signor!" and he mends his pace. But they were parting company there, it seemed, and away went the deformed with his unsightly beast at his heels, and this way came the youth in black. So, standing full in his way, and doffing his cap, and throwing back his cloak that his snowy beard and head might appear, and the stranger recognized him when he drew nigh, he cried, "Borromeo implores thee to take pity on his ignorance." "What? Still mad?" said the young man. "This man will waste the small remnant of his years in godless search after golden immortality. Better he should know all and feel their vanity." "Better 1,000 times!" cried the old man in ecstasy. "There is in this city, signor, at this time in great secrecy, the master who taught me," says the youth, "the master of all alchemists. Many centuries since he found out the elixir vitae. From him I've learned the few secrets that I know, and without his leave I dare not impart them. If you desire it, I will bring you before him, but once in his presence you cannot recede, and his conditions you must accept." All with my whole heart, but some reasonable pleasures." "With your pleasures he will not interfere. He cannot change your heart," said the young man, with one of his heavy sighs. "But you know what gold is and what the elixir is, and power and immortality are not to be had for nothing." "Lead on, signor, I'm ready," cries the old man, whose face flushed, and his eyes burned with the fires of an evil rapture. "Take my hand," said the young man, more stern and pale than he had yet appeared. So he did, and his conductor seized it with a cold gripe, and they walked swiftly on. Now he led him through several streets, and on their way Borromeo passes his notary, and lingering a moment asks him whether he has a bond, signed by a certain merchant, with whom he had contracted for a loan. The notary, who was talking to another, says suddenly to that other, "Perbacco, I've just called to mind a matter that must be looked after for Signor Borromeo." And he called him a nickname which incensed the astrologer, who struck him a lusty box upon the ear. "There's a humming in my ear tonight," said the notary, going into his house. "I hope it is no sign of the plague." So on they walked side by side till they reached the shop of a vintner of no good repute. It was well known to Borromeo, a house of evil resort, where the philosopher sometimes stole, disguised by night to be no longer a necromancer but a man, and so from a man to become a beast. They passed through the shop. The host, with a fat, pale face and a villainous smile, was drawing wine, which a handsome damsel was waiting to take away with her. He kissed her as she paid, and she gave him a cuff on his fat white chops and laughed. "What's become of Signor Borromeo?" said the girl, "that he never comes here now?" "Why, here he is!" cries Borromeo with a saturnine smile, and he slaps his broad palm on her shoulder. But the girl only shrugged with a little shiver and said, "What a chill down my back! They're walking over my grave now." The Italian phrase here is very nearly equivalent. "Why, they neither hear nor see me," said the astrologer, amazed. They went into the inner room, where guests used to sit and drink, but the plague had stopped all that, and the room was empty. "He's in there," said the young man. "You'll see him presently." Borromeo was filled with an awful curiosity. He knew the room, he thought, well, and there never had been, he thought, a door where the young man had pointed. But there was now a drapery there, like what covers a doorway, and it swelled and swayed slowly in the wind. "Some centuries," said the astrologer, looking on the dark drapery. "Geber, perhaps, or Alfarabi. It matters not a pin's point what his name. You'll call him my lord, simply. And, observe, we alchemists are a potent order, and it behoves you to keep your word with us." "I will be true," said Borromeo. "And use the powers you gain beneficently," repeated his guide. "I'm but a sinner. I will strive, with only an exception, in favor of such things as make wealth and life worth having," answered the philosopher. "See, take this, and do as I bid you," said the youth, giving him a thin round film of human skin. How the honest monk who wrote the tale, or even Borromeo himself, knew this and many other matters he describes, 'tis for him to say. "Breathe on it," said he. And when he did so, he made him stretch it to the size of a sheet of paper, which he did quite easily. "Now, cover your face with it as with a napkin." So he did. "'Twill do. Give it to me. It is but a picture, see?" And it slowly shrunk until its disk was just the same as that of the lady's miniature in the lid of the box over which he fixed it. Borromeo beheld his own picture. "Every adept has his portrait here," said the young man. "So good a likeness is always pleasant, but these have a power beside, and establish a sympathy between their originals and their possessor, which secures discipline and silence." "How does it work?" asked Borromeo. "Have I not been your good angel?" said the young man, sitting before him. He extends his legs, pushing out his feet, and letting his chin sink on his chest. He fixes his eyes upon him with a horrible and sarcastic glare, and one of his feet contracts and divides into a goatish stump. Borromeo would have burst into a yell, but he could not. "It is a nightmare, is it not?" said the stranger, who seemed delighted to hold him minute after minute in that spell. At last the shoe and hose that seemed to have shrunk apart like burning parchment closed over the goatish shin and hoof, and rising he shook him by the shoulder. With a gasp the astrologer started to his feet. "There, I told you it was a nightmare, or what you please. I could not have done it but through the picture. You see how fast we have you. You must for once resemble a Christian, Borromeo, and with us deal truly and honestly." "You've promised me the elixir vitae," the old man said, fearful lest the secret should escape him. "And you shall have it. Go bring a cup of wine. He'll not see you, nor the wine, nor the cup." So he brought a cup of Falernian, which he loved the best. "There's 50 years of life for every drop," said the youth. "Let me live 1,000 years, to begin with," cries Borromeo. "Beware, you'll tire of it." "Nay, give me the 20 drops." So he took the cup and measured the drops, and as they fell the wine was agitated with a gentle simmer all over, and threw out ring after ring of purple, green, and gold. And Borromeo drank it, and sucked in the last drop in ecstasy, and cried out, blaspheming with joy and sensual delight, "And I'm to have this secret too!" "This and all others when you claim them," said the young man. "See, 'tis time," he added, and Borromeo saw that the great misshapen dog he had seen in the street was sniffing by the stranger's feet. When they went into the inner room there was a large table, and many men at either side, and at the head a gigantic man, with a face like the face of a beast, but the flesh was as of a man. Borromeo quaked in his presence. "I am aware of what hath passed, Borromeo," he said. "The condition is this. You take this vial, and with the fluid it contains and the sponge, trace the letter S on every door of every church and religious house within the walls of Milan. The dog will go with you." It was a fiend in dog shape, says the monkish writer, and had he failed in his task would have torn him in pieces. So Borromeo, that old arch-villain, undertook this office cheerfully, well knowing what its purpose was. For it was a thing notorious that Satan was himself in a bodily though phantasmal shape seen before in Milan, and that he had tempted others to a like fascinorious action. But happily for their souls in vain. The Stygian satellites of the fiend had power to smear the door of every unconsecrated house in Milan with that pestilential virus, as indeed the citizens with their own eyes, when first the plague broke out, beheld upon their own doors. But they could not defile the church gates, nor the doors of the monasteries, and according to the conditions under which their infernal malice is bound, they could in no wise effect it save by the hand of one who was baptized, which to the baleful abuse of that holy sacrament the wretch, Borromeo, had been. He did his accursed and murderous office well and fearlessly. His reward Mammon, an indefinite long life. The hell-dog by his side compelling him, and the belief in his invisibility making him confident withal. But therein was shown forth to all the world the craft of the fiend, and the just judgment of heaven. For he was plainly seen in the very act by the sexton of the church of St. Mary of the Passion, and by the pastor of the convent of St. Justina of Padna, and the same officer of the Olivetans of St. Victor. So, finding in the morning the only too plain and fatal traces of what he had been doing, with a mob at their heels, who would have had his life but for the guard, they arrested him in his house next morning, and the mob breaking in, smashed all the instruments of his infernal art, and would have burnt the house had they been allowed. He, being duly arraigned, was, according to law, put to the torture, and forthwith confessed all the particulars I have related. So he was cast into a dungeon to await execution, which secretly he dreaded not, being confident in the efficacy of the elixir he had swallowed. He was not to be put to death by decapitation. It was justly thought too honorable for so sordid a miscreant. He was sentenced to be hanged, and after hanging a day and a night, he was to be laid in an open grave outside the gate on the Roman road, and there impaled, and after 3 days' exposure to be covered in, and so committed to the keeping of the earth, no more to groan under his living enormities. The night before his execution, thinking deeply on the virtue of the elixir, and having assured himself by many notable instances, which he easily brought to remembrance, that they could not deprive him, even by this severity, of his life, he lifted up his eyes and beheld the young man, in mourning suit, whose visit had been his ruin, standing near him in the cell. This slave of Satan affected a sad countenance at first, and said he, "We are cast down, Borromeo, by reason of thy sentence." "But we've cheated them," answers he, pretending maybe more confidence than he had. "They can't kill me?" "That's certain," rejoins the fiend. "I shall live for 1,000 years," says he. "Aye, you must continue to live for full 1,000 years. 'Tis a fair term, is it not?" "A great deal may be done in that time," says the old man, while beads of perspiration covered his puckered forehead, and he thought that perhaps he might cheat him, too, and make his peace with heaven. "They can't hang me," says Borromeo. "Oh, yes, they will certainly hang you, but then you'll live through it." "Aye, the elixir!" cried the prisoner. Thus stands the case. When an ordinary man is hanged, he dies outright. But you can't die. "No, I can't die." Therefore, when you are hanged, you feel, think, hear, and so forth during the process. "Saint Anthony! But then 'tis only an hour, 1 hour of agony, and it ends." "You are to hang for a whole day and night," continued the fiend. "But that don't signify. Then when they take you down, you continue to feel, hear, think, and if they leave your eyes open, to see, just as usual. "Why, yes, certainly, I'm alive," cries Borromeo. "Yes, alive, quite alive, although you appear to be dead," says the demon with a smile. "Aye, but what's the best moment to make my escape?" says Borromeo. "Escape? Why, you have escaped. They can't kill you. No one can kill you until your time is out. Then, you know, they lay you in an open grave and impale you." "What?" roared the old sinner. "You are jesting." "Hush! Depend upon it, they will go through with it." The old man shook in every joint. "Then, after 3 days and nights, they bury you," said his visitor. "I'll lose my life, or I'll break from them," shouts the gigantic astrologer. "But you can't lose your life, and you can't break from them," says the fiend softly. "Why not? Oh, blessed saints, I'm stronger than you think." "Aye, muscle, bones. You are an old giant." "Surely," cries the old man, "and the terror of a dead man rising. Don't you see? They fly before me, and so I escape." "But you can't rise." Say in heaven's name what you mean," thundered old Borromeo. "Do you remember, senor, that nightmare, as we jocularly called it, at the sign of the Red Hat? Well, a man who, having swallowed the elixir vitae, suffers that sort of shock which in other mortals is a violent death, is afflicted during the remainder of his period of life, whether he be decapitated or dismembered, or is laid unmutilated in the grave with that sort of catalepsy which you experienced for a minute, a catalepsy that does not relax or intermit. For that reason you ought to have carefully avoided this predicament." "'Tis a lie!" roared the old man, and he ground his teeth. "That's not living!" "You'll find upon my honor that it is living," answered the fiend, with a gentle smile, and withdrawing from the cell. Borromeo told all of this to a priest, not under seal of confession, but to induce him to plead for his life. But the good man, seeing he had already made himself the liegeman and accomplice of Satan, refused, nor would his intercession have prevailed in any wise. So Borromeo was hanged, impaled, and buried, according to his sentence. And it came to pass that 14 years afterwards that grave was opened, and making a great drain from the group of houses thereby. And Borromeo was found just as he was laid therein, in no wise decayed, but fresh and sound, which indeed showed that there did remain in him that sort of life which was supposed to ward off the common consequences of death. So he was thrown into a great pit, and with many curses covered in with stones and earth, where his stupendous punishment proceeds. Get thee hence, Satan.
Distressing Tale of Tangobrine the Jeweller by Lord Dunsany. When Tangobrine the jeweller heard the ominous cough, he turned at once upon that narrow way. A thief was he, of very high repute, being patronized by the lofty intellect, for he stole nothing smaller than the muumuu's egg, and in all his life stole only 4 kinds of stone, the ruby, the diamond, the emerald, and the sapphire. And, as jewelers go, his honesty was great. Now there was a merchant prince who had come to Tangobrine, and had offered his daughter's soul for the diamond that is larger than the human head, and was to be found on the lap of the spider idol, Hlo, in his temple of Mungaling. For he had heard that Tangobrine was a thief to be trusted. Tangobrine oiled his body and slipped out of his shop, and went secretly through byways, and got as far as Snarp, before anybody knew that he was out on business again, or missed his sword from its place under the counter. Thence he moved only by night, hiding by day and rubbing the edges of his sword, which he called Mouse because it was swift and nimble. The jeweller had subtle methods of travelling. Nobody saw him cross the plains of Zeed. Nobody saw him come to Mursk or Tlun. Oh, but he loved shadows. Once the moon, peeping out unexpectedly from a tempest, had betrayed an ordinary jeweller. Not so did it undo Tangobrine. The watchman only saw a crouching shape that snarled and laughed. "'Tis but a hyena," they said. Once in the city of Ag, one of the guardians seized him, but Tangobrine was oiled and slipped from his hand. You scarcely heard his bare feet patter away. He knew that the merchant prince awaited his return, his little eyes open all night and glittering with greed. He knew how his daughter lay chained up and screaming night and day. Ah, Tangobryn knew, and had he not been out on business, he had almost allowed himself one or two little laughs. But business was business, and the diamond that he sought still lay on the lap of Hlo-Hlo, where it had been for the last 2 million years since Hlo-Hlo created the world and gave unto it all things except that precious stone called Dead Man's Diamond. The jewel was often stolen, but it had a knack of coming back again to the lap of Hlo-Hlo. Tangobryn knew this, but he was no common jeweler and hoped to outwit Hlo-Hlo, perceiving not the trend of ambition and lust, and that they are vanity. How nimbly he threaded his way through the pits of Snood, now like a botanist scrutinizing the ground, now like a dancer leaping from crumbling edges. It was quite dark when he went by the towers of Tor, where archers shoot ivory arrows at strangers, lest any foreigner should alter their laws, which are bad, but not to be altered by mere aliens. At night they shoot by the sound of the stranger's feet. O Tangobryn, Tangobryn, was ever a jeweler like you? He dragged 2 stones behind him by long cords, and at these the archers shot. Tempting indeed was the snare that they set in Woth, the emeralds loose set in the city's gate, but Tangobryn discerned the golden cord that climbed the wall from each, and the weights that would topple upon him if he touched one, and so he left them, though he left them weeping, and at last came to Teth. There all men worship Hlo-Hlo, though they are willing to believe in other gods, as missionaries attest, but only as creatures of the chase for the hunting of Hlo-Hlo, who wears their halos, so the people say, on golden hooks along his hunting belt. And from Teth he came to the city of Mung, and the temple of Mungaling, and entered and saw the spider idol Hlo-Hlo, sitting there with Dead Man's Diamond glittering on his lap, and looking for all the world like a full moon, but a full moon seen by a lunatic who had slept too long in its rays. For there was in Dead Man's Diamond a certain sinister look, and a boding of things to happen that are better not mentioned here. The face of the spider idol was lit by that fatal gem. There was no other light. In spite of his shocking limbs and that demoniac body, his face was serene and apparently unconscious. A little fear came into the mind of Tangobryn the jeweler, a passing tremor, no more. Business was business, and he hoped for the best. Tangobryn offered honey to Hlo-Hlo, and prostrated himself before him. Oh, he was cunning. When the priests stole out of the darkness to lap up the honey, they were stretched senseless on the temple floor, for there was a drug in the honey that was offered to Hlo-Hlo. And Tangobryn the jeweler picked Dead Man's Diamond up, and put it on his shoulder, and trudged away from the shrine. And Hlo-Hlo the spider idol said nothing at all, but laughed softly as the jeweler shut the door. When the priests awoke out of the grip of the drug that was offered with the honey to Hlo-Hlo, they rushed to a little secret room with an outlet on the stairs and cast a horoscope of the thief. Something that they saw in the horoscope seemed to satisfy the priests. It was not like Tangobryn to go back by the road by which he had come. No, he went by another road, even though it led to the narrow way, night house and spider forest. The city of Mung went towering up behind him, balcony above balcony, eclipsing half the stars as he trudged away with his diamond. He was not easy as he trudged away, though when a soft pittering as of velvet feet arose behind him, he refused to acknowledge that it might be what he feared. Yet the instincts of his trade told him that it is not well when any noise whatever follows a diamond by night, and this was one of the largest that had ever come to him in the way of business. When he came to the narrow way that leads to Spider Forest, Dead Man's Diamond feeling cold and heavy, and the velvety footfalls seeming fearfully close, the jeweler stopped and almost hesitated. He looked behind him. There was nothing there. He listened attentively. There was no sound now. Then he thought of the screams of the merchant prince's daughter, whose soul was the diamond's price, and smiled and went stoutly on. There watched him apathetically over the narrow way that grim and dubious woman whose house is the night. Tangobryn, hearing no longer the sound of suspicious feet, felt easier now. He was all but come to the end of the narrow way when the woman listlessly uttered that ominous cough. The cough was too full of meaning to be disregarded. Tangobryn turned round and saw at once what he feared. The spider idol had not stayed at home. The jeweler put his diamond gently upon the ground and drew his sword called Mouse, and then began that famous fight upon the narrow way in which the grim old woman whose house was night seemed to take so little interest. To the spider idol you saw at once that it was all a horrible joke. To the jeweler it was grim earnest. He fought and panted and was pushed back slowly along the narrow way, but he wounded Hlo all the while with terrible long gashes over his deep, soft body, till Mouse was slimy with blood. But at last the persistent laughter of Hlo was too much for the jeweler's nerves, and once more wounding his demoniac foe, he sank aghast and exhausted by the door of the house called Night at the feet of the grim old woman, who, having uttered once that ominous cough, interfered no further with the course of events. And there carried Tangobryn the jeweler away those whose duty it was, to the house where the two men hang, and taking down from his hook the left-hand one of the two, they put that venturous jeweler in his place, so that there fell on him the doom that he feared, as all men know, though it is so long since, and there abated somewhat the ire of the envious gods. And the only daughter of the merchant prince felt so little gratitude for this great deliverance, that she took to respectability of a militant kind, and became aggressively dull, and called her home the English Riviera, and had platitudes worked and worsted upon her tea-cosy, and in the end never died, but passed away at her residence.
Ring Once for Death by Robert Arthur. 20 years had left no trace inside Sam Key's little shop on Mott Street. There were the same dusty jars of ginseng root and tiger's whiskers, the same little bronze Buddhas, the same gimcrack mixed with fine jade. Edith Williams gave a little murmur of pleasure as the door shut behind them. "Mark," she said, "it hasn't changed. It doesn't look as if a thing has been sold since we were here on our honeymoon." "It certainly doesn't," Dr. Mark Williams agreed, moving down the narrow aisle behind her. "If someone hadn't told us Sam Key was dead, I'd believed we'd stepped back 20 years in time like they do in those scientific stories young David reads." "We must buy something," his wife said, "for a 20th anniversary present for me. Perhaps a bell?" From the shadowy depths of the shop a young man emerged, American in dress and manner despite the oriental contours of his face and eyes. "Good evening," he said. "May I show you something?" "We think we want a bell," Dr. Williams chuckled, "but we aren't quite sure. You're Sam Key's son?" "Sam Key, Jr. My honored father passed to the halls of his ancestors 5 years ago. I could just say that he died." Black eyes twinkled. "But customers like the more flowery mode of speech. They think it's quaint." "I think it's just nice and not quaint at all," Edith Williams declared. "We're sorry your father is dead. We'd hoped to see him again. 20 years ago, when we were a very broke young couple on a honeymoon, he sold us a wonderful rose crystal necklace for half price. I'm sure he still made a profit." The black eyes twinkled again. "But if you'd like a bell, here are small temple bells, camel bells, dinner bells." But even as he spoke, Edith Williams' hand darted to something at the back of the shelf. "A bell carved out of crystal," she exclaimed, "and rose crystal at that. What could be more perfect? A rose crystal wedding present and a rose crystal anniversary present." The young man half stretched out his hand. "I don't think you want that," he said. "It's broken." "Broken?" Edith Williams rubbed off the dust and held the lovely bell shape of a crystal, the size of a pear, to the light. "It looks perfect to me." "I mean it is not complete." Something of the American had vanished from the young man. "It has no clapper. It will not ring." "Why, that's right." Mark Williams took the bell. "The clapper's missing." "We can have another clapper made," his wife declared. "That is, if the original can't be found." The young Chinese shook his head. "The bell and the clapper were deliberately separated by my father 20 years ago." He hesitated, then added, "My father was afraid of this bell." "Afraid of it? Mark Williams raised his eyebrows. The other hesitated again. It will probably sound like a story for tourists, he said, but my father believed it. This bell was supposedly stolen from the temple of a sect of Buddhists somewhere in the mountains of China's interior. Just as many Occidentals believe that the Christian Judgment Day will be heralded by a blast on St. Peter's trumpet, so this small sect is said to believe that when a bell like this one is rung, a bell carved from a single piece of rose crystal and consecrated by ceremonies lasting 10 years, any dead within sound of it will rise and live again. Heavenly, Edith Williams cried, and no pun intended. Mark, think what a help this bell will be in your practice when we make it ring again. To the Chinese she added, smiling, I'm just teasing him. My husband is really a very fine surgeon. The other bowed his head. I must tell you, he said, you will not be able to make it ring. Only the original clapper, carved from the same block of rose crystal, will ring it. That is why my father separated them. Again he hesitated. I have told you only half of what my father told me. He said that, though it defeats death, death cannot be defeated. Robbed of his chosen victim, he takes another in his place. Thus when the bell was used in the temple of its origin, let us say when a high priest or a chief had died, a slave or servant was placed handy for death to take when he had been forced to relinquish his grasp upon the important one. He smiled, shook his head. There, he said, a preposterous story. Now if you wish it, the bell is $10, plus, of course, sales tax. The story alone is worth more, Dr. Williams declared. I think we'd better have it sent, hadn't we, Edith? It'll be safer in the mail than in our suitcase. Sent? His wife seemed to come out of some deep feminine meditation. Oh, of course, and as for its not ringing, I shall make it ring. I know I shall. If the story is true, Mark Williams murmured, I hope not. The package came on a Saturday morning when Mark Williams was catching up on the latest medical publications in his untidy book-lined study. He heard Edith unwrapping paper in the hall outside. Then she came in with the rose crystal bell in her hands. Mark, it's here, she said. Now to make it ring. She plumped herself down beside his desk. He took the bell and reached for a silver pencil. Just for the sake of curiosity, he remarked, and not because I believe that delightful sales talk we were given. Let's see if it will ring when I tap. It should, you know. He tapped the lip of the bell. A muted thunk was the only response. Then he tried with a coin, a paper knife, and the bottom of a glass. In each instant the resulting sound was nothing like a bell ringing. If you've finished, Mark, Edith then said with feminine tolerance, let me show you how it's done. Gladly, her husband agreed. She took the bell and turned away for a moment. Then she shook the bell vigorously. A clear, sweet ringing shivered through the room, so thin and ethereal that small involuntary shivers crawled up his spine. Good Lord, he exclaimed. How did you do that? I just put the clapper back in place with some thread, Edith told him. The clapper? He struck his forehead with his palm. Don't tell me. The crystal necklace we bought 20 years ago. Of course. Her tone was composed. As soon as young Sam Key told us about his father separating the clapper and the bell, I remembered the central crystal pendant on my necklace. It is shaped like a bell clapper. We mentioned it once. I guessed right away we had the missing clapper, but I didn't say so. I wanted to score on you, Mark. She smiled affectionately at him. And because, I had a queer feeling Sam Key, Jr. wouldn't let us have the bell if he guessed we had the clapper. I don't think he would. Mark Williams picked up his pipe and rubbed the bowl with his thumb. Yet he didn't really believe that story he told us any more than we do. No, but his father did, and if old Sam Key had told it to us, remember how wrinkled and wise he seemed? I do believe we'd have believed the story. You're probably right. Dr. Williams rang the bell and waited. The thin, sweet sound seemed to hang in the air a long moment, then was gone. Nope, he said. Nothing happened. Although, of course, that may be because there were no deceased around to respond. I'm not sure I feel like joking about the story. A small frown gathered on Edith's forehead. I had planned to use the bell as a dinner bell and to tell the story to our guest, but now I'm not sure. Frowning, she stared at the bell until the ringing of the telephone in the hall brought her out of her abstraction. Sit still, I'll answer. She hurried out. Dr. Williams, turning the rose crystal bell over in his hand, could hear the sudden tension in her voice as she answered. He was on his feet when she re-entered. An emergency operation at the hospital, she sighed. Nice young man, automobile accident. Fracture of the skull, Dr. Amos says. He wouldn't have disturbed you, but you're the only brain man in town with Dr. Hendricks away on vacation. I know. He was already in the hall reaching for his hat. Man's work is from sun to sun, but a doctor's work is never done, he misquoted. I'll drive you. Edith followed him out. You sit back and relax for another 10 minutes. 2 hours later, as they drove homeward, the traffic was light, which was fortunate. More than once Mark, in a frowning abstraction, found himself on the left of the center line and had to pull back into his own lane. He had lost patience before, but never without a feeling of personal defeat. Edith said he put too much of himself into every operation. Perhaps he did, and yet, no, there was every reason why the young man should have lived. Yet just as Mark Williams had felt that he had been successful, the patient had died. In 20 years of marriage, Edith Williams had learned to read his thoughts at times. Now she put a hand comfortingly on his arm. These things happen, darling, she said. You know that. A doctor can only do so much. Some of the job always remains in the hands of nature, and she does play tricks at times. Yes, confound it, I know it, her husband growled, but I resent losing that lad. There was no valid reason for it, unless there was some complication I overlooked. He shook his head, scowling. I ordered an autopsy, but... Yes, I'm going to do that autopsy myself. I'm going to turn back and do it now. I have to know. He pulled abruptly to the left to swing into a side road and turn. Edith Williams never saw the car that hit them. She heard the frantic blare of a horn and a scream of brakes, and in a frozen instant realized that there had been someone behind them about to pass. Then the impact came, throwing her forward into the windshield and unconsciousness. Edith Williams opened her eyes. Even before she realized that she was laying on the ground and that the figure bending over her was a state trooper, she remembered the crash. Her head hurt, but there was no confusion in her mind. Automatically, even as she tried to sit up, she accepted the fact that there had been a crash, help had come, and she must have been unconscious for several minutes at least. Hey, lady, take it easy, the trooper protested. You had a bad bump. You gotta lie still until the ambulance gets here. It'll be along in 5 minutes. Mark, Edith said, paying no attention. My husband, is he all right? Now, lady, please. He's being taken care of. You... But she was not listening. Holding to his arm, she pulled herself to a sitting position. She saw their car on its side some yards away, other cars pulled up around them. A little knot of staring people. Saw them and dismissed them. Her gaze found her husband laying on the ground a few feet away, a coat folded beneath his head. Mark was dead. She had been a doctor's wife for 20 years, and before that a nurse. She knew death when she saw it. Mark. The word was spoken to herself, but the trooper took it for a question. Yes, lady, he said. He's dead. He was still breathing when I got here, but he died 2-3 minutes ago. She got to her knees. Her only thought was to reach his side. She scrambled across the few feet of ground to him, still on her knees, and crouched beside him, fumbling for his pulse. There was none. There was nothing. Just a man who had been alive and now was dead. Behind her she heard a voice raised. She turned. A large, disheveled man was standing beside the trooper, talking loudly. Now listen, officer, he was saying. I'm telling you again, it wasn't my fault. The guy pulled a sharp left right in front of me. Not a thing I could do. It's a wonder we weren't all 3 of us killed. You can see by the marks on the car, it wasn't my fault. Edith Williams closed her mind to the voice. She let Mark's hand lie in her lap as she fumbled in her bag, which was somehow still clutched in her fingers. She groped for a handkerchief to stem the tears which would not be held back. Something was in the way, something smooth and hard and cold. She drew it out and heard the thin, sweet tinkle of the crystal bell. She must have dropped it automatically into her bag as they were preparing to leave the house. The hand in her lap moved. She gasped and bent forward as her husband's eyes opened. Mark, she whispered. Mark, darling. Edith. Mark Williams said with an effort. Sorry, damned careless of me, thinking of the hospital. You're alive, she said. You're alive. Oh, darling, darling, lie still. The ambulance will be here any second. Ambulance, he protested. I'm all right now. Help me sit up. But Mark, just a bump on the head. He struggled to sit up. The state trooper came over. Easy, buddy, easy, he said, his voice odd. We thought you were gone. Now let's not lose you a second time. His mouth was tight. Hey, I'm sure glad you're all right, the red-faced man said in a rush of words. Woo, Phil, you had me all upset, even though it wasn't my fault. I mean, how's a guy gonna keep from hitting you when... Catch him, Mark Williams cried, but the trooper was too late. The other man plunged forward to the ground and lay where he had fallen, without quivering. The clock in the hall struck 2 with muted strokes. Cautiously, Edith Williams rose on her elbow and looked down at her husband's face. His eyes opened and looked back at her. You're awake? She said unnecessarily. I woke up a few minutes ago, he answered. I've been lying here, thinking. I'll get you another phenobarbital. Dr. Amos said for you to take them and sleep until tomorrow. I know. I'll take one presently. You know, hearing that clock just now reminded me of something. Yes? Just before I came to this afternoon, after the crash, I had a strange impression of hearing a bell ring. It sounded so loud in my ears I opened my eyes to see where it was. A bell? Yes, just auditory hallucination, of course. But Mark... Yes? A bell did ring. I mean, I had the crystal bell in my bag and it tinkled a little. Do you suppose... Of course not. But though he spoke swiftly, he did not sound convincing. This was a loud bell, like a great gong. But, I mean, Mark, darling, a moment earlier you had no pulse. No pulse? And you weren't breathing. Then the crystal bell tinkled and you... Nonsense! I know what you're thinking, and believe me, it's nonsense. But Mark, she spoke carefully, the driver of the other car, you had no sooner regained consciousness than he had a fractured skull, Dr. Williams interrupted sharply. The ambulance intern diagnosed it. Skull fractures often fail to show themselves and then, bingo, you keel over. That's what happened. Now let's say no more about it. Of course. In the hall the clock struck the quarter hour. Shall I fix the phenobarbital now? Yes, no. Is David home? She hesitated. No, he hasn't got back yet. Has he phoned? He knows he's supposed to be in by midnight at the latest. No, he hasn't phoned, but there's a school dance tonight. That's no excuse for not phoning. He has the old car, hasn't he? Yes, you gave him the keys this morning, remember? All the more reason he should phone. Dr. Williams lay silent a moment. 2 o'clock is too late for a 17-year-old boy to be out. I'll speak to him. He won't do it again. Now please, Mark, let me get you the phenobarbital. I'll stay up until David... The phone ringing, a clamor in the darkness, interrupted her. Mark Williams reached for it. The extension was beside his bed. Hello, he said. And then, although she could not hear the answering voice, she felt him stiffen, and she knew, as well as if she could hear the words she knew, with a mother's instinct for disaster. Yes, Dr. Williams said. Yes, I see, I understand. I'll come at once. Thank you for calling. He slid out of bed before she could stop him. An emergency call, he spoke quietly. I have to go. He began to throw on his clothes. It's David, she said, isn't it? She sat up. Don't try to keep me from knowing. It's about David. Yes, he said. His voice was very tired. David is hurt. I have to go to him. An accident. He's dead, she said it steadily. David's dead, isn't he, Mark? He came over and sat beside her and put his arms around her. Edith, he said. Edith, yes, he's dead. 40 minutes ago. The car went over a curve. They have him at the county morgue. They want me to identify him. Identify him, Edith. You see, the car caught fire. I'm coming with you, she said. I'm coming with you. The taxi waited in a pool of darkness between 2 street lights. The long, low building, which was the county morgue, a blue lamp over its door, stood below the street level. A flight of concrete steps went down to it from the sidewalk. 10 minutes before, Dr. Mark Williams had gone down those steps. Now he climbed back up them, stiffly, warily, like an old man. Edith was waiting in the taxi, sitting forward on the edge of the seat, hands clenched. As he reached the last step, she opened the door and stepped out. "Mark," she asked shakily, "was it?" "Yes, it's David." His voice was a monotone. "Our son. I've completed the formalities. For now, the only thing we can do is go home." "I'm going to him." She tried to pass. He caught her wrist. Discreetly, the taxi driver pretended to doze. "No, Edith, there's no need. You mustn't see him." "He's my son," she cried. "Let me go." "No, what have you got under your coat?" "It's the bell, the rose crystal bell," she cried. "I'm going to ring it where David can hear." Defiantly she brought forth her hand, clutching the little bell. "It brought you back, Mark. Now it's going to bring back David." "Edith," he said in horror, "you mustn't believe that's possible. You can't. Those were coincidences. Now let me have it." "No, I'm going to ring it." Violently she tried to break out of his grip. "I want David back. I'm going to ring the bell." She got her hand free. The crystal bell rang in the quiet of the early morning with an eerie thinness, penetrating the silence like a silver knife. "There," Edith Williams panted, "I've rung it. I know you don't believe it, but I do. It'll bring David back." She raised her voice. "David," she called. "David, son, can you hear me?" "Edith," Dr. Williams groaned. "You're just tormenting yourself. Come home. Please come home." "Not until David has come back. David, David, can you hear me?" She rang the bell again, rang it until Dr. Williams seized it, then she let him take it. "Edith, Edith," he groaned. "If only you had let me come alone." "Mark, listen." "What?" "Listen," she whispered with fierce urgency. He was silent, and then fingers of horror drew themselves down his spine at the clear, youthful voice that came up to them from the darkness below. "Mother? Dad? Where are you?" "David," Edith Williams breathed. "It's David. Let me go. I must go to him." "No, Edith," her husband whispered frantically as the voice below called again. "Dad, Mother, are you up there? Wait for me." "Let me go," she sobbed. "David, we're here. We're up here, son." "Edith," Mark Williams gasped, "if you've ever loved me, listen to me. You mustn't go down there. David, I had to identify him by his class ring and his wallet. He was burned, terribly burned. I'm going to him." She wrenched herself free and sped for the steps, up which now was coming a tall form, a shadow shrouded in the darkness. Dr. Williams, horror knotting his stomach, leaped to stop her, but he slipped and fell headlong on the pavement so that she was able to pant down the stairs to meet the upcoming figure. "Oh, David," she sobbed. "David." "Hey, Mom." The boy held her steady. "I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, but I didn't know what had happened until I got home and you weren't there, and then one of the fellows from the fraternity called me. I realized they must have made a mistake and you'd come here, and I called for a taxi and came out here. My taxi let me off at the entrance around the block, and I've been looking for you down there. Poor Pete." "Pete?" she asked. "Pete Friedberg. He was driving the old car. I lent him the keys and my driver's license. I shouldn't have, but he's older, and he kept begging me." Then it's Pete who was killed?" she gasped. "Pete who was burned?" "Yes, Pete. I feel terrible about lending him the car, but he was supposed to be a good driver. And then them calling you and Dad thinking it was me." "Then Mark was right. Of course he was right." She was laughing and sobbing now. "It's just a bell, a pretty little bell, that's all." "Bell? I don't follow you, Mom." "Never mind." Edith Williams gasped. "It's just a bell. It hasn't any powers over life and death. It doesn't bring back and it doesn't take away. But let's get back up to your father. He may be thinking that the bell really worked." They climbed the rest of the steps. Dr. Mark Williams still lay where he had fallen headlong on the pavement. The cab driver was bending over him, but there was nothing to be done. The crystal bell had been beneath him when he fell, and it had broken. One long, fine splinter of crystal was embedded in his heart.